Joan of Arc is probably one of the best-known heroine figures. Died at the age of 19, she had accomplished more than anyone in her time. Even though her fame was widely spread, many people may not be very familiar with what she actually did and what impact she had in history. This video will explain what happened in Joan's life and why she is still remembered today. To understand Joan of Arc, we have to first understand the era she lived in. It was during the last phase of the Hundred Years' War. In short, the English king had a claim on the French throne, so England and France fought for the title for several generations. After a series of lost battles for France, in 1420 England and France signed the Treaty of Troyes, which stated that after the current French king Charles VI died, the English king Henry V will succeed to be the next king of France. But a surprise for everyone happened. The English king Henry V died a few months earlier than the French king Charles VI. Henry V's oldest child, Henry VI, was only 9 months old, so the child of Charles VI, Charles VII, claimed that he should inherit the throne from his father, and another round of war between France and England began. The situation of the war was not good for Charles VII, Prince of France. First, a powerful vassal, the Duke of Burgundy, joined the English side, claiming that Charles VII assassinated the previous Duke of Burgundy, the father of the current Duke. Also, France lost a series of battles. One that suffered the greatest loss was the Battle of Verneuil. Even though the French outnumbered the English in this battle, 8,000 French soldiers died, with England only have 1,600 lost of men. Even worse was that Charles VII was called Dauphin of France, meaning the first prince on the line of succession, instead of King of France, because all French kings have to be crowned at Reims Cathedral. But Reims was occupied by England at the time. Not being a king for Charles VII means that fewer people would be supportive of him. The situation couldn't be worse for Charles VII, but one person will soon save him, and the savior for him was Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was born and raised in a village called Domremy. His father owned 50 acres of land and had been a local tax collector. Even though Joan's family was relatively affluent and didn't worry much about material needs, Joan was believed to be illiterate as all her future letters were written in third person, which meant that they were likely to be written by scribes. Her village, Domremy, was on the front line between France and Burgundy. Also technically ruled by Burgundy, the people in her hometown remained loyal to France. This could be explained because when Joan was young, her village was looted many times by the English Burgundian troops and devastated the local economy. Joan was a deeply devout Christian since her childhood. When she was 13 years old, she had a vision. She saw three angels, St. Michael, St. Catherine, and St. Margaret, who told her to expel the English from France and help the Dauphin of France to be crowned. When she was 16 years old, she felt the time was ready and went to the nearest French commander, Robert de Baudricourt, and asked him to bring her to Charles VII. The commander first refused and mocked her, but after Joan precisely predicted that France would lose a battle near Orleans, which turned out to be true a few days later, she was sent to Chinon, where Dauphin of France resided. Charles VII, in order to test her, disguised himself into a crowd of nobles and tried to see if Joan could find him. But she walked directly to him after seeing him. After this miracle, Charles VII had a secretive talk with Joan. We don't know what Joan told Charles VII, but she convinced him to let her command a troop to save Orleans. Orleans, at the time, was besieged by English Burgundian troops for about a year. The morale in the city was low, and they faced serious supply shortages. Before Joan came, French troops had already fought with the English at the Battle of the Herrings outside of the city, and miserably failed, which further decreased morale. When Joan of Arc came, she was distrusted by the generals at Orleans, but Joan was welcomed by the residents, who saw her as a saint. When she entered the city, she met a crowd of people who tried to touch her and her horse, for they believed that it would bring them good luck. During the 1 year of siege, the English had already built a series of fortresses and defensive buildings on both sides of the Loire River to block supply from entering the city. When Joan arrived, she decided to attack the fortresses on the south bank, where the English force was weaker. After a series of battles, all fortresses in the south bank of the Loire fell to the hand of the French. The English realized that they were impossible to take Orleans anymore, and hence retreated from this area. In the series of battles in Orleans, Joan of Arc showed her courage and talent. When they attack, she went to the front line, and when they retreat, she remained to the last to go to protect her soldiers. She boosted the morale of her army with one victory after another. She dared to oppose plans made by experienced French commanders. Unlike the French commanders who were very careful to attack the English, Joan often had bold plans, which gained her many staggering victories. She earned the respect from other French generals who initially despised her. The most influential one would be the Duke of Alençon, John II, who became a strong supporter of her and fought many battles together afterward with Joan. The Duke of Alençon supported Joan because, during one battle, she predicted that a rock would fall to where the Duke stood, and told him to move. The Duke moved away with suspicion, but after a few moments, a rock did hit where he initially stood. After all, in the Battle of Orleans, Joan proved that besides her miracles and visions, she was also an outstanding military commander at the time. After the siege of Orleans, with the support from Charles VII, Joan, accompanied by Duke of Alençon, swept through English-controlled Loire Valley, taking all of their fortresses, cities, and bridges. There were four important battles. They are the Battle of Jargeau, Mont-sur-Loire, Beaugency, and Patay. The climax of this was the Battle of Patay, where English archers were suddenly attacked by French cavalry troops. There were only 1,500 French soldiers and faced 5,000 English soldiers, but in the end, the English lost about 2,500 men, with the French only losing about 100 people. Taking control of the Loire Valley was for the purpose of going further north. Joan of Arc convinced the Dauphin of France to take a bold plan, directly taking back Reims, the traditional place for the coronation of French kings. The plan was surprisingly successful, where Joan and her army faced little resilience. On the 16th July 1429, Joan took back the city of Reims from the English, and on the second morning, the coronation of Charles VII was held. This was the most glorious time in Joan's life. Many famous paintings in the future illustrated this scene, where Charles VII kneeled down and waited for the crown to be put on his head, and Joan of Arc standing closest to him wearing a shining armor. Without Joan, it is hard to imagine how the French troop could possibly taking back so much territory from the English in such a short amount of time. Joan then led her troops toward Paris and tried to free the city, but this campaign was quickly called to an end by Charles VII, who was negotiating with England and trying to gain advantages from a possible peace deal. But just a few months later, war broke out again, and Joan's legend was nearing its end. On 23rd May 1430, in a conflict with the English Burgundian army, she was captured by Burgundians. She attempted to escape several times. One time she even jumped down from a 21-meter tower and to a dry river bed, but all her attempts failed. She was then sent to the English and captivated at Rouen. Many people had the impression that Charles VII did nothing to save Joan of Arc, but from historic records it is not true. The French king raised at least 3 campaigns trying to seize Rouen, but all failed with the heavily defended city. The English put Joan of Arc into trial for heresy. The tribunal was totally biased towards the English. They forced Joan to sign abjuration to commit her crimes. Funny enough, the crime that put her to death was repeatedly dressing male clothes, which was not allowed at the time. On 30th May 1431, Joan was executed by burning. At the time, she was only 19 years old. Although Joan of Arc's life was short, her legacies were long-lasting. After her death, Charles VII and his generals managed to continually defeat the English. In 1453, 22 years after Joan's death, the Hundred Years' War was put to an end, with England losing all its territories and mainland Europe, except the city of Calais, and Burgundy returning under the rule of France. Joan of Arc became a symbol of patriotism in France. Her commemoration was especially popular after France lost the Franco-Prussian War. The French people hoped for another Joan of Arc against the Germans. In 1920, she was officially canonized by the Roman Catholic Church and remembered as a paragon of virtue, courage, and justice for all Catholic people. As a woman, she stepped into a career that is most unlikely for females in the Middle Ages, but she proved to be a brilliant strategist and unparalleled legend of her time. I hope that you learned something from these videos. If you enjoy it, please subscribe and like. Also, please tell me what topic do you want me to cover in the future in the comment section. I hope you have a good day and see you next time.